Now a quick word about tonight. Our late member, Janet Feldwell, had the idea some year back that our February meeting be a town birthday program. This is to remember the incorporation of North Brookfield back in 1812 in the month of February. So happy birthday, North Brookfield, your 193rd year. For the past number of years, we've had a reminiscent evening in February, which we've asked other members and others to recall what it was like to live here a long time ago. Mr. Coble will lead off, and then I'm going to ask for your help in remembering North Brookfield as you know it. And now I'd like to introduce Mr. Coble.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Again, my name is Bill Coble, President of North Brookfield Savings Bank. And I'd like to just briefly, and when I say briefly, no matter how long it takes me to go through 150 years, we're going to go through it. But I will be brief, I promise you. I would like to give credit, though, for an individual who did a lot of this work that I'm going to mention tonight, and that's Louis Roy. He did a lot of background into the bank for 125th anniversary. So I didn't want to give him credit for a lot that I'm going to just review with you tonight. The narrative that I'm going to go through is just leading up to the establishment of the North Brookfield Savings Bank. And we do have a charred piece of paper that we found with the records of the bank, and it reads as follows, and I'll quote here. It says, "At a meeting of citizens in town of a bank, for a bank in North Brookfield, held in Town Hall on April 7th, 1853, Colonel Pitney Nye was chosen chairman and Mr. Knight secretary. After remarks by various individuals, it was voted that the secretary draft the subscription paper for which was done. Voted that a committee be chosen to solicit subscriptions." And then it says CL, and then it was, I couldn't quite make it out, and it says in Knight for North and East Brookfield, Mr. William Ayers and N.B. Jenks for Barry, GN, and it was ineligible, I couldn't read it, and Charles for South and West Brookfield, Colonel Nye for New Braintree, and Isaiah Batchelor for Spencer. And then they voted to adjourn at 7:30 Saturday very next. End of the quotation. So originally, the plans for the bank in North Brookfield originated in 1853. And it's likely after they voted and had that subscription made out that they then would have to present it in Boston to the general court. And in 1854 they did that. And the general court established the North Brookfield Savings Bank, and it was to be located in the town of North Brookfield with all the powers and privileges and subject to all the duties, liabilities, and restrictions set forth in Chapter 36 of the statute. Now, Amias Walker, he was a local figure who was a highly successful industrialist and a prominent legislator. He was a prominent legislator on the state level as well as on the federal level, national level. He was also a college professor at Oberlin, in Amherst, and Harvard. He was born in Woodstock, Connecticut. However, he moved and lived in North Brookfield from 1799 on his family estate, and until he died in 1875. He was elected the bank's first president and served in that capacity for 6 years. It was known that he opposed slavery, and he led the Boston Temperance Society. So as you can see, he was no ordinary man, and I think it speaks well for the solid foundation that he gave the bank. The second most influential person in the foundation of the bank was another outstanding citizen of North Brookfield, Hiram Knight. He was a North Brookfield merchant and was elected to the office of Secretary and Treasurer of the bank. The bank was located in his store originally in the townhouse building until that structure burned down in 1862. when the bank was continued in his home. Mr. Knight served in many civic posts in social organizations and was in a Civil War veteran. He also served as Secretary and Treasurer for the bank for 10 years. It is said that he had a rather unique way of securing the assets of the bank at night. What he would do, he had a pulley and a chain in his chimney, and he would put the assets in the strong box and put it up the chimney. And when I heard that, I'm saying, let's see now, when he was the treasurer at the town hall there, it burnt down, and I'm wondering if the two are related at all, but I never was able to find that out. Another important factor in the establishment of the bank was, besides the contributions of these two individuals, was the population and the prevailing economy in North Brookfield at the time. The population was a little over 1,100 people, and that was the largest town in the area. And this was due to a large part of the Batchelor Shoe Company, which was the largest shoe manufacturer in the world at the time. And in 1854, it was doing an annual business of $1.5 million. Now that's a lot of money in 1854. As the Reverend Snell said in 1854, previous to the shoe business, and I quote, "Previous to the shoe business, the people of the town of North Brookfield, with very few exceptions, were farmers, and were making next to no progress in anything profitable, or calculated to elevate their character and promote the cause of morality or civilization." Now, I don't know quite equating money with progress as far as character. I don't know, we could talk about, that's ready for another discussion, I think. You could argue some of the things that he said, but that was the thinking back then. Now, both the population size and the prosperity pointed toward the need for a local bank, and that's why we were incorporated back in that time. In 1864, Bonham Nye, who was another prominent citizen of North Brookfield, became treasurer of the bank. And it was located in his home until 1893. At this time, a new bank was erected, and it's situated where the bank's present location is. And we have bills showing that it cost $11,306 to build that building back then. Now, to build a building that size, just equating it to what we built in Belchertown, you'd be talking $4 or $5 million at least. I mean, just to give you an idea of building costs today. The building was remodeled in 1973, and that's when we purchased that house that was on that property, and I have pictures of that, and I also noticed there's pictures up on that table of that house that was there before. The house that they tore down, I think, had a lot of character, and it was a shame to tear down a house like that for a parking lot and to expand the bank the way they did, but that's still going on today. The bank has had 15 presidents since 1854, and interestingly, in 1924, the bank established a new office of Executive Vice President and Appraiser and elected F. Arthur Fulham to hold both positions. And this was brought about mainly because of the Depression. There was an awful lot of foreclosures going on then, and they needed an individual to just handle that because of what was going on in the economy. And speaking of foreclosures, that's probably the worst part of banking, is when you have to foreclose on somebody's home. In addition to the 15 presidents that the bank has had, we have been fortunate to have services of many public-spirited men and women who have given unselfishly of their time and efforts as corporators, trustees, and board members throughout these 150 years. They all have made no small contribution towards making the bank sound and healthy financial institution that it is today. We have been also fortunate to have conscientious and efficient and loyal employees. And we've had steady growth through the 150 years of the bank's operation, with the exception of between the years of 1894 and 1904. And at that time, that's when the Bachelor Shoe Company went out of business. And just to give you an example of that, in 1894, our total assets were $637,000. In 1904, that dropped to $536,000. And then in 1914, they increased to $686,000. So there was a span there because of that, the shoe company going out of business, that it hurt the economy all around the area. As far as what's ahead, the future looks bright. I think in this time of mega mergers and mega banks, that the community banks such as North Brookfield definitely has a niche in the marketplace in today's world. I think people are a little tired of being treated, and I know it's an old cliche, but like a number. I think the smaller banks offer better service, and I think the smaller banks make people feel more comfortable dealing one-on-one with bank personnel. A lot of the mega banks do not want to be bothered with the customer today. They're concentrating on business loans, and that's all their emphasis is on. The smaller community banks, I think, serve a very, very useful purpose, even in this world of mega banks. And the trustees and the corporators of the bank have made it a point to inform me, and my job is to inform the other employees that that's how we try and run our business, to make sure that it's one-on-one and that we don't get carried away with trying to be big, big, big. I have a saying, and I think you'll agree, or at least I hope I agree, that bigger does not necessarily mean better. And that's kind of our philosophy, that there is a spot for a small bank. Just a couple of interesting notes in conclusion. We were paying higher interest rates than we are now back 130 years ago. And that's kind of scary, isn't it? But that just shows you in this marketplace right now, this place in the economy, that rates are extremely low. I think the saver feels it a lot more probably than the borrower. But it's just a function of the economy. I also noticed in looking back some of the old clippings in the bank that, and we have some paper clippings that we used to have to report. This is back in the 1800s, early 1900s. We used to have to report when somebody didn't come into the bank for 10 years, we would have to put their name, the balance in their savings book, and ask them to come in and verify that. Now, after 3 years of no activity, the state gets the money. No one has any say on it. And then you have to go to the state, and you see those in the paper with the Treasury has a list of names of unclaimed money. The state, in their wisdom, decided that the banks shouldn't keep that money. It should go to the state to be used instead. Also, every 3 years, they would put in the paper asking the customers of the bank to come in. They'd have an independent group of auditors in the bank, and they would verify the bank's balance to your passbook balance, just as a check. So every 3 years, they'd publicize that in the paper, that the auditors are in the bank, please bring your books in and we'll verify the balances. That was to make sure the bank was being honest with you and keeping their records straight, and that they agreed with your records. I have some interesting, what I feel are interesting clips. We've had 2 robberies in our history. The first one was back in, at the main office, was back in 1932. And I have some articles from a Hartford paper where they caught the 4 men. And I also have some articles, an article from the Brookfield Union, which cost 3 cents at the time, December 2nd of 1932, and it goes over the robbery. Interesting enough, in one of the articles, they asked the robbers, that they were interviewing a state policeman, and they asked why they picked the savings bank to rob. And he said that, well, they were driving around, they needed money, and it was the only place that didn't have any street lights, which I thought was interesting. I just hand these out, you can look them over. The other thing I brought, and I mentioned it, no matter how many years go by, things don't change. And this is a 1879 balance sheet that I dug out of the records. And I was looking through it before I came up here tonight, and I noticed that they broke out the deposits. Number of deposits held by women, number of deposits by guardians, by trust, and so on, and by balances. And again, things never change. Women held more deposits than all of the others put together in the bank back in that time. So nothing's changed. Why don't I pass that over here? You can look that over. And I also brought pictures of the house that was torn down so that they could put the addition on the bank as well as the parking lot. Does anyone have any questions that I could try and answer? Or?
They bought that house from my father-in-law.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
that's interesting. From your father-in-law?
Yes.
It's a beautiful house.
Well, he had inherited it through his wife.
Oh, okay. And I bet we paid too much for it, too. Usually when they find out it's a bank trying to buy something, the price goes up.
Do you happen to know where the safe is that Hiram Knight used to have in his house?
Gee, I don't.
It's in the basement to the First Congregational Church.
Really? Isn't that something?
My father bought the Knight house in 1913 or around 1913.
Boy.
And we moved into the house, lived there until my father died.
Oh. Now, did you hear the same story that he used to bring the safe up into the chimney? So, yeah. So it wasn't just a rumor, it was the
He
truth.
had, his house was an octagon house. And the rooms were all squared off, except what had been large walk-in closets.
Oh,
Or the front hall or the side hall was triangular.
sure.
And it was a wonderful place to play hide and go seek or tag in.
Oh, I bet. I mean, the house looks like it had a lot of character to it, sure.
Well, it's not that house.
No, not
No,
that
no,
house. That's the octagon house of Hiram Knight,
okay.
which was on Grove Street and part of the back of the shipping department of Quabog Rubber is built over that land.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Was there ever anybody who belonged to the bank that lived in what was Cook's house across from the factory? I had heard there was a vault in their basement.
Well, that was Nye's house.
Nye?
Yeah,
Oh.
that was Roman Nye's house.
Oh, okay. So he had a vault too.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be
All
still
bank
there.
employees must have had a vault to take home with them, huh? I wonder why they did away with that.
I think that was better than putting it in the chimney.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul,
Thank you.
President of the bank, for giving us this nice, interesting. There's refreshments after, but what we really want to get at tonight, I'm hoping that somebody can give us a little bit of history and past things that they know about North Brookfield. And these are a couple of things that I kind of thought maybe if somebody wanted to talk about any of this. Pass it around, these are all the same. Any of those subjects interest anybody? Jeanette?
Is this something you'd like to talk about? How about shopping in North Brookfield stores?
Can you bring us up to date a little bit about things in the past?
I can remember when we used to pay 8 cents for a loaf of bread. 8 cents. And if I tell the children that when they come into Old Sturbridge Village now, they think I'm There's something wrong here. At one time, that I can remember, we had 3 bakeries here in town. No bread was brought in that I know of. You either bought it from one of the bakeries or made your own.
Where were they located, Jeanette? Where were they located?
Herads was up on North Common Street, corner of, it was under his house facing North Common Street, but on the corner of St. John and Forest. Then, I'm trying to think of their names. I think it was Lovely. Had a bakery where I think part of the new building that's an eyesore to North Brookfield, across from Bush's house, or across from the one that they have rejected buying from, and then the one where the Angels manicurist and so forth is now, was another one.
That was
And
Tires.
that went through 3 or 4 different,
Tires Bakery.
what?
That was run by the Tires, Tyre.
Tyre, Tire?
It was long before Tire. Tires didn't come in too long before the First World War. Well, Second World War. During the First World War, I can't remember their names, but I know that he and his wife had been the matron and the farmer of our town farm down on Town Farm Road. And he left that and started the bakery up there. And one of his daughters was married and lived up in Paxton, and they had a roadside stand up there for years that I think Howe now owns now. But I used to be sent up to Herads for bread as a child. And of course I went kitty corner across the common. And I didn't like it very well. I much rather have my father go. Well, I found out my folks didn't like squashed bread. So I come home and tell them that I was chased by some of the boys from Little Canada. So my father'd have to go for 2 or 3 days, then they'd send me again. Well, maybe for a couple of days I didn't squash the bread, but after that. I do wish that I had the first bank book that I had at the North Brookfield Savings Bank. It was dated in 1911, and they put $5 in.
That's all right, yeah.
And I remember for a long time as a youngster, I got 5% interest on
Yep.
what was in that bank.
That was good. Wow.
I'd like it now.
You and a lot of people.
We had 2 men's stores in town. We had 2 women's clothing stores. We had 2 different places that were making hats and selling them. We had 5 meat markets and 4 grocery stores. We had 3 barber shops, one on the first floor of the town hall, and you didn't go out of town too often to buy things. You bought them here in town. Now, people in West Brookfield would have to take the trolley and go to Ware. There weren't too many automobiles around. My father was one of the few that kept an automobile going all winter. And they were so few that if I ran my father's car up on Grove Street and put my brakes on and skidded around, I could head back down North Main. No trouble at all, because there'd be nothing coming. There were the 3 main churches: the Congregational, the St. Joseph's, and the Methodist over on Grove Street. There were 4 candy stores. And you could buy candy a penny or get several pieces for a penny. Bruce's was very popular. That was over near the corner, well, it's where the fish place is now on School Street. And the first 4 grades in the public school were in the Grove School, and people sometimes wondered why the Grove School was called that when the high school was on Grove Street. Well, there used to be a grove of oak trees there. And if you went to go up the sidewalk into the main part of that 4th grade school, you went through a row of oak trees. So I suppose that's why they called it a grove. Every recess, you had to have some pennies in your pocket to go over to Bruce's and get some penny candy. And Gleason's was over in the Adams block. In the 1920s, we began to get an influx of people here from the Quabbin district. They were getting out, a lot of them, before they started doing a lot of the work up there. And Mr. Payne came down and had a store right here on this end of the Adams block. Then Howard's was in the Town Hall block, and so was H.E. Cummings. Then we had was it Clotherland? Came into town in the A&P. Then a lot of people in what we called Little Canada had their own stores up there. One on Forest Street, another on North Common. You used to be able to buy gasoline in about 6 different places in town instead of one that we have today. don't know, is anything else that you want to know about? I'll say anything about it.
Thank you so much. That was very good.
That was good.
Anybody? Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to contribute?
I have one question.
Yeah.
St. Joseph's Church at one time, was there a blacksmith in that area? Do you
What?
recall? St. Joseph's Church, was there a blacksmith in that area, as you recall?
Before I moved to town, yes.
Oh, okay. Because my uncle used to tell me about it.
But there also was 2 blacksmiths later on.
Okay. I don't know just when it was there, but he used to tell me about it. Thank you.
And quite a few people from town used to go to New Braintree, to the blacksmith up there. And long after my father didn't have any more horses, we had a friend that lived on a farm. And in spring and fall, she had to drive one horse and lead another one that they owned. And she always stopped at the store in the center of New Braintree. And the man there would reach down and take a great big cucumber pickle, a sour one. And we'd each have a pickle to eat with our lunch that we had taken. And that pickle was the best thing.
How old would you have been when you did that? How old would you have been when you did that your parents let you do that?
Well, it was before I was a teen.
You can't let your kids out of your yard today.
Sylvia, do you have anything to say?
She covered it.
Anybody else want to talk about anything that was funny that was going on? Anything, any scandals, anything that happened in North Brookfield years ago? Nothing?
Well, I can just tell you that there used to be the Quaybog Spring that was very famous, and my husband used to sell spring water from it when he was about 15 years old. That's down on 8th Street. It has been abandoned, but the spring is still there, but there was a building over it, and they had sterilizer in there and different kinds of equipment. And George's father used to clean out the spring every so often. They'd drain it, scrub the bottom, scrub the sides of all the algae that had collected, and then they'd fill bottles and deliver them throughout the town.
I will say one thing. When I was a youngster, it was before I was 5 years old, I was allowed to go from our house over on Grove Street, come down the length of the rubber shop, come School Street, cross the road, go over to the post office and get the mail twice a day. You couldn't let a 5-year-old do that today. Also, I remember, I wasn't too old, when the armistice was signed from World War I, and the Quaybog Rubber had an air whistle. They blew it in the morning, they blew it at 12 o'clock, noon. They blew it again at 1 to make sure everyone's back at work. And they blew it at night, but it would be just a short thing. Well, for armistice, it kept on going and going and going. And I remember my mother went into my dad's pharmacy and put cotton in our ears. And we walked around that house, the Hiram Night House, with tears rolled down our cheeks because that hurt so, even with the cotton in our ears. And every bell and every other whistle in town was going at the same time.
How about entertainment with the staff theater? I mean, I don't really remember that. Can somebody tell anything about the staff theater in town? About the street there? Anyone?
I used to take my children there back in the 50s, or no, maybe 60.
In the
bowling alley that was over the gas station, the barber shop on Central Street. And Jenny's, was there the bowling alley?
Yes,
When did that close?
in the
In the
40s.
40s?
It was after the war.
I don't know what other entertainment they had here.
Yeah.
The Star Theater,
Star
they
Theater.
had 3 shows a week, double features, and they were good. I mean, they were up-to-date movies. They had newsreel and fun attractions.
The cartoons.
You got a lot for your few coins.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else anybody want to talk about?
Before we had movies with sound, we had a woman here in town by the name of Helena Monahan, who probably some of you can remember later on. And she would come into the theater, and all of a sudden, you'd know when she was coming because every kid in the place would start pounding with their feet and clapping their hands. She'd come in, go down one side, her piano was sideways so that she could look at the movie that was going on. And every time there was some shooting or something going on in a Wild West thing, she always played one of the marches, but very, very loud. And she didn't have to look at her hands or music or anything. She just played. The kids loved it. And every Saturday, we had a matinee and it cost us 10 cents.
10 cents.
Did the railroad have a turntable, the North Brookfield Railroad have a turntable over there in the lumber company? Mrs. Monahan lived on the hill there, actually.
Your engine came into town and it backed out of town.
Was there always a lumber yard there?
What?
Was there always a lumber yard there?
Oh, yes. Fulham had their lumberyard from, well, Will Fulham had it first. That was the father of the 3 boys. Charlie went into hardware. Arthur had, used to cut wood and buy land and so forth. And he was the one that was working in the bank. And during the Depression, 2 days a week, he spent collecting rents and so forth of the property that the bank owned down around Boston. And Harry had the lumberyard. But Will was still in the lumberyard when I was a kid.
John Fulham was probably one of the,
What?
John Fulham was probably one of the sons. He was in my president of my high school class.
Yes.
And there was a car dealership too,
Yeah.
the car dealer.
His father owned a car dealership.
Yeah.
Saw the first '54 Corvette. John was driving it around.
But Johnny's dead now, but Billy's still living in town.
How is he? His older brother.
But Linwood and Dick are gone. But we have John Crucell, who was the grandson of Harry Fulham.
Oh, really?
So John's on your board, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, he's a very active member.
When did Mr. Crucell start the insurance here?
What?
When did Mr. Crucell, Axel, start the insurance in this town?
He bought the F.A. Smith and
Oh.
Company. John's father graduated from Amherst College, and then he was down in New York for a while. And then Frank A. Smith and Son was being sold, and he came in, bought that, and moved back here. But they were still living down there when John was born. Because I was around at Mary Lane Hospital when John was born.
Among others. Among others.
Does anybody else have questions for Jeanette?
The hotel disappeared in the 1800s?
No. No. The hotel burned sometime in the 20s. So did Morrison's up on Forest Street. There weren't any, you see, automobiles and buses were coming in. Before that, you'd come in on the train and then you'd stay overnight, or maybe the salesman would stay a few days. So they were both being used, and people were coming into town and living, particularly at the one up on Forest Street, and working at the Quabog Rubber. Then they got so they could go back and forth. You see, in 1926, the road to West Brookfield and the road to Brookfield was still dirt roads. I don't remember, it was sometime in the late 20s that the West Brookfield Road was tarred, and I don't think the Brookfield Road was tarred until in the 30s. And the winter, if you wanted to go to Warren by automobile, you drove to East Brookfield and went through the other Brookfields to get over to Warren. And when the, what is now Route 9 used to be Route 20.
Really?
And that wasn't moved down, Route 20 wasn't moved down to Sturbridge until they put some new roads there along what is now North Oxford and North Charlton and cut Southbridge out.
Huh.
Because you go and get out of Southbridge and out. But you wouldn't go through that land in between.
The trolley came through Spencer and East Brookfield into North Brookfield.
The trolley went through East Brookfield, Brookfield, West Brookfield to where? The train went through where it goes now. But that's why a lot of West Brookfield people used to do their banking in Ware, was because they could get there. A lot of Ware people go Springfield way, where from Warren East, we go Worcester way, or used to. But we had a trolley that just came from East Brookfield to North Brookfield, the same as the train did. And your trolley came right up here, went up to opposite what used to be the Grange Hall, and is now the Veterans. And the man would get out and he'd take a thing and turn it around and put it on the wire the other way, and then you'd come back down. And people would, the farmers, very few of them had trucks. until into the 30s. And they'd have bring the milk into the town in their wagons. And up at the corner of Maple Street, they'd leave their big jugs.
When you came into the town, what we call now the rubber shop, what was that? What were they doing there then?
What?
Bachelors between 1894 and 1904?
Yeah,
Stop.
it was Richard's rubber shop for a while. And then I don't know whether it was the American or what it was.
Okay.
But the linen mill on Grove Street, which later became asbestos, was
Oh.
still going strong when I moved into town.
I see. It was linen, huh?
Yep. In fact, Hop Street used to go between what was the linen mill and the Methodist church. It ran down there, and there were two houses in back of the Methodist church. Then it made a curve and went across and came out onto South Common Street, right opposite where, what's this? St. Clair Avenue.
Okay.
And in fact, there was a good-sized house in back of the high school facing Hobb Street.
Oh, yeah. Did you go to that high school?
Did I go to that high school? Sure I did.
Yeah, so did I. I was the last one in the last class, in the last row, to graduate from that high school, before they moved the high school out.
My son was in that class,
What was his name?
George Howland.
Oh, Buzzy.
Buzz.
Yeah.
Yes. He was in the first class at the high school they just tore down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my son was too.
He and I were in Scouts together. And he and I were paper routes together. And he was always my rival.
Okay, does anybody else have anything to add to all this?
When, there's a picture over here of ice hockey. Where did they, any idea where they did the ice skating?
They used to ice skate up on Bachelor's Pond, which was in back of the ice house, which was across and down beyond where the new high school is.
Oh, okay.
And of course, that dam went out in '38 at the time of the hurricane, and there hasn't been a good-sized pond there since.
Oh,
But at this time of year, they would have been up there cutting ice.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, we used to have two different people selling ice here in town. And probably a lot of you today know John Murphy that has an oil business. His great-grandfather was the one that used to bring ice to my house, Ed Murphy. And he worked for Batchelor. And Batchelor owned the first house on Forest Street on the left. Not the one on the corner that faces School Street, but the next one that I think John Murphy owns now.
I remember it was a Clem McCarty, the big guy who used to bring ice to our house.
Clem Sandman.
Salmon, okay.
Yeah, that was Sandman. He worked for McCarty.
Okay.
You always give it chips and ice. And one thing get Cheetos on the coffee.
The,
We used to have one policeman. That was Steve Will. And a grandson of his was in town recently, and they called me up because they wanted to know where they could find the type of uniform he had. He never had a uniform, for heaven's sakes. He had a star that he wore. I think the young fellow was quite upset because his ancestor didn't have a uniform.
Where were the other meat markets? I remember Dupel's.
What?
Where were the other meat markets? I remember Dupel's.
Oh, Dupel's was so much later.
Probably was.
Igo's had really the largest meat market, and that was over where the Quabog Rubber is now.
Huh.
And the building there had Charlie Fulham's Hardware on this end. Then it had a barber shop in the middle, and then Igo and his brother had the meat market.
Oh, on the other side of the street, huh?
Yes.
For the offices.
Yeah.
Then there used to be a meat market where the fruit market was for a long time under the town hall. And I believe years before I was around, the Walkers had it. Do you remember John Walker?
He was in my class.
Well, it would have been John Walker's grandfather that had it.
Okay. Was he related to the Walker that started the bank?
What? No, that's a different Walker.
Okay.
Yeah. And he didn't mention Amos or Walker, but he had quite a bit to do with the bank, didn't he?
Yes, he did, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I mentioned him, I should have.
Oh, you may have, and I
Yeah.
missed it.
Yeah.
Well, this is very interesting. Jeanette, you should rewrite the history of Mount Brookfield. So much you know it all, and it's good because all this, if you've gone, we're not gonna know this. I mean, this is what you need, people who can
That's right.
tell.
Right. She's got an excellent memory.
No kidding, I can't remember what happened yesterday.
You know, if somebody questions me, I could answer quite a few things, but as far as sitting down to write it out,
Do you
But
remember,
it's all right up there, you still have a lot to say, and that's good. Does anybody else want to contribute?
well, I don't know how many of you remember Don Crooks.
I do.
But
Thought it was in my class.
Don Crooks always looked at me, he says, well, you're not a native. I was 3.5 when we moved in on Brookfield. Before that, I lived within 1 mile of the North Brookfield line in West Brookfield, but I'm not a native. Because I wasn't born here, according to Don.
But you know, it's true even when you have your home. You know, when we first bought our house, we lived in it for 12, 13 years before it was our house. It was always the person before us. They always brought their name up. It was never my house. It was their house. So it's true.
Well, that's the way I think of the houses in town, as to who they belonged to when
Right.
I was a child.
Right.
What do you remember of Judge M. Cohen?
What?
What do you remember of Judge M. Cohen?
Well, he only came here to visit after I was around. I mean, not for long visits and all, because he was down in New York most of the time.
His grandparents lived on Grove Street or something?
But he'd come and he always stayed up on Bell Street.
Bell Street.
Do you remember Connie Mack coming to town with his baseball team?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
The Amateurs was a good team.
Very good.
Of course, that day they had somebody from East Brookfield that was the best on their team that we used to play against.
They beat Judge Cohen's team, didn't they?
Fred Gravitt used to play on that team, didn't he?
What?
Fred Gravitt, was he part of the team, the Almond Threads?
I don't think he played that day.
Did
He
he
wasn't
play?
tall enough.
Short, okay, no, but, yeah.
I can
Talking
tell you
when
about
Connie
the
Mackey-
Gravitt twins when they were in high school.
Right.
And they used to play basketball. And Henry was the better player than Fred. And Henry would always foul out. So they'd go in the one dressing room at the town hall and change jerseys. And then Henry would come back on. And I thought the other team was so stupid. I couldn't tell the difference. And I thought, how did they get away with it? Because they didn't look anything alike to me.
And Mr. Como from the bank brought some dessert up there, so if anybody would like some dessert, we'd love to have you have some, maybe coffee and pastry there. And thank you all. This was very good. Thank you. Very nice.